This is People I Know Show, a podcast about interesting people, personal growth, and being wrong. I'm your host, Curt Karstensen. On this episode of the podcast, you'll hear an extended conversation with Blessing Okon. Over the past 3 years, Blessing has become one of my closest friends. Blessing is from Africa, and most specifically the country of Nigeria. She describes her country and culture as well as the transition to becoming an American by living in the United States. For as well as Blessing and I get along, we have starkly different viewpoints on how the world works, which will be demonstrated in the first parts of the discussion. Later on, we talk about the dynamic of our friendship, which can be difficult to define. We get into that topic, and Blessing describes me from her experiences of getting to know me over the past few years. The recording begins as she and I were in her car on a Texas freeway not long ago. Blessing was driving, and I was using one microphone, so you may hear some noises associated with driving or some imperfect audio at times. We had been listening to a podcast, and it sparked a conversation about free will. Remember, you can find People I Know Show on Facebook and Instagram to see photos of Blessing and I, or me with any of my podcast guests. And always, with feedback, you can email to peopleiknowshow@gmail.com. Now, let's join my conversation with Blessing Okon.
I think I was trying to tie back to when you were saying, sometimes I feel like I have to do this one thing. And because I feel like I have to, then I do it, and therefore there's no free will. And I feel like, well, is it likely that the reason that you may feel as such is maybe someone somewhere else did something that set something in motion that, as we are interconnected, causes you to feel that sensation of, I have to do this. And therefore you do it. But then again, it still remains that choice of, you don't have to do this. Even if you choose to do it, you still have that remaining choice of you don't have to do something.
So it makes us think about all the things that we do, all the things we decide, every little thing that we do in our lives. It's then we have the freedom to do it or not do it. But ultimately, when you have to work tomorrow, do you actually make the decision to go or not? Or do you just go because you know you're supposed to, you have to, you've made the decision, it's already like, it's happening?
Well, it's already happening. Reason why? Because I committed to, yes, I'm going to work tomorrow. And by working tomorrow, I'm making, conscious decision to create funds for myself to do whatever it is that I need to do to get me to the next step in my life. So I've made that commitment. I've made that choice. The choice of not working still remains, which I could pick up the phone and call in and say, sorry, can't come to work today, or can't come to work tomorrow. I still have that option.
And what would cause you to make that quote-unquote decision?
It's a freedom of... I have free will.
So it might happen, though, if you feel sick, and for that reason, you're not going to go be a nurse when you're feeling sick and possibly spread something. So that's not even a choice. You're just not going to go.
No, literally, as we're going back, when we get there, I could make a decision of, I don't feel like going to work, so I'm not going to go. Not necessarily because I'm sick or not sick. I just don't feel like going to work, so I don't go to work. Is what I'm trying to say. If you have that freedom of choice, then those are your options. You can either go to work, you can choose not to go to work. You don't have to be sick before you go to work. I went to work. I had a sinus congestion. I went to work. But guess what? I wore a mask because I didn't want to possibly spread around what it is. I don't think that I had any kind of thing that was communicable. But I still wore a mask anyway as a precaution. There's an option. Just because you're sick doesn't necessarily take away, the choices that you have. No.
I was listening to, I don't know if it was a podcast or something on the news recently. I think it was on the news. There was some debate over perfect attendance because some school somewhere had done this thing where every month, if a child or a student had a perfect attendance, they would give an award, and they're going to get rid of this program because they found that the kids, once they get that award, their attendance becomes worse. And I'm not necessarily sure how this plays into this conversation, except that when I think back to my life, I was someone that had perfect attendance for certain years. There are kids that never miss a day of school. Somehow, at a young age, it was built into my mind that if I can go, I go. So I'm not someone that, if I think about it, I don't know ever for a job, if I've just thought, I don't want to go today, I'm going to call in and say that I'm sick or just not show up. For to me, it's not a choice. I show up under almost all kinds of conditions I shouldn't, and I don't feel like it's a choice. It's just something I have to do because the way that my mind is structured at this point in my life, there is no choice involved. Sure, I could have other influences that get me to change that about myself, but it's not going to be a quick thing, I don't see. So I don't feel like it's free will for me to go in or not to go. I think it's so ingrained in me to go. So that would be my argument for the possibility that in this case, that it's not free will from my point of view, but perhaps you see it differently.
I actually do. So that has been ingrained in you since you were a child. But then again, it is your choice to continue in that structured mindset. You definitely have a choice to decide, okay, these are what my parents taught me. I'm going to continue on this path or not. You yourself as an adult, you chose to continue on that, with that mindset on that path. And that's what works for you. And you continue in that way. That doesn't necessarily mean that takes away your choices. You still have a choice to say, I'm not going to follow this, so therefore I'm going to be flexible with, where I'm going, when I'm going to show, where I'm going to show up, when I'm going to show up, and why, the reason why I'm going to show up for this particular thing. That's what it is. If you feel like you don't have an option B, or you don't have a say or a choice in, being present at, let's say, a workplace or a school or whatever function, it's because you took away that choice for yourself. No one did. You took it away because you feel like you have to be there. You have to be present. You don't have to be present.
And you might be right. Your perspective may be more sound than mine. And I'm not even sure that this is my perspective. It's something that I've become more aware of because for the entirety of my thought on the topic of free will, I felt like I've had it. And now, after learning of other people's positions on this, I've thought of, and that's where this conversation began, is I think that it's possible that the free will that I once thought I had, that I don't really have the same way, that it's more determined what I do based on other influences, and I don't really have these choices. And I just think it's a topic worth considering, and I don't know the answers. Maybe we'll never know the answers, but I feel like it's worth considering. And the reason why it's worth considering, before I turned on the microphone, Blessing, and by the way, this is Curt Carstensen, and who am I speaking with today?
Blessing Okon.
So Blessing and I are driving back from Austin, Texas, to the suburbs of Houston, Texas, where Blessing currently resides. And we just finished listening to a podcast that was the Waking Up podcast with Sam Harris talking to Bart Ehrman, who is a professor, has a PhD in New Testament studies, and he works at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And this is one of the more influential things that I've listened to, as I've come out as being a non-believer, an atheist, and Blessing has an opposing viewpoint. So I shared this with her, and she graciously listened to this. And one of the things that came out of this podcast was our discussion over free will.
Curt, why did you pick this particular podcast to listen to? Why are you interested in knowing this gentleman's view? Why?
That is a terrific question, Blessing. So perhaps it's free will. Perhaps it's just this thing that I felt I need to pursue a better understanding of what I once believed, and once I no longer believe, in the whole process of unbelieving, it's important to me to try to learn about it and seek the truth. And the truth, I don't know if it's even ever attainable. I enter this knowing that I don't really know if I'll ever know the truth, but in efforts to find the truth, I tend to find people that seem to have taken an approach not so different than mine, which maybe complicates my understanding because I end up finding more people that believe something similar to what I believe, which I think is what we all are. We all end up possibly in a bubble of people with similar beliefs, which is very dangerous. So I try to be aware of this bubble. But the reason I chose this podcast is yesterday on our 3-day trip to Austin, as we forever have these back and forth conversations, me not believing, you having a strong belief. I don't know that I'm trying to convince you, but perhaps I am trying to convince you. I like to share with you some tidbits of things that I have found that I find striking. Like, ooh, this Bart Ehrman guy, he brings a perspective and knowledge base that I think is worth hearing.
Are you trying to convince me of your belief, or are you, by talking to me, you're convincing yourself in the process? I don't understand.
I think what I don't get, and I get it. I get that I look at things my own way and not everyone's going to think the way I think. But I'm curious to why I've become so attached to understanding this and looking at it, and I'm drawn to the things I'm drawn to. So I would like to present the things that I'm drawn to someone that thinks quite differently and just kind of see what happens. Does it make you equally as curious? Do you hear it and just totally ignore it and think, no, that's nonsense? Or how do you react to it? So that's why I'm curious how you react to it and how the dynamic of us talking about this subject in the future may be influenced.
When I listen to it, I mean, I don't completely ignore it. I mean, it sets some things in motion in my head. It's like, okay, I'm always questioning. I know a lot of times you mention, I don't think you question your belief, or do you even ask questions regarding it. And that's something that I've always done. And through it, by questioning, it's helped me grow spiritually. I may not question in front of you, but around friends with a similar belief system, or not necessarily. And it's helped me understand better and also, solidify in my faith. So by listening to you or listening to your points or the podcast, it's helped me understand a little bit better what I am thinking, or try to reason. I'll come up with an explanation that helps me understand what it is that we're discussing. So, for example, today, coming back, we're talking about this benevolent God that is causing, allowing such evil things and bad things to happen in the world. Why hasn't God just stepped in and take control of it and make it just perfect? And that's why we got into this talk regarding free will. If God steps in, takes away free will, and you're asking me, does the good trump free will or vice versa? And that is not something that I know. And by listening to the podcast along with you, that kind of also brought up the question, and that's something that I told you. Those are things that I've questioned as well in my walk and in my understanding of my faith. I've questioned it several times, and occasionally it still comes up where I question it. But in this time, I've come to a different understanding of, we make choices that affect others, and it's an everyday walk. It's an everyday growth. So you talking to me definitely triggers some thoughts, cause me to think a little bit more, without neglecting or walking away from what I believe. I don't think anything is convincing enough. Or any evidence is powerful enough to cause me to say, oh, okay, well, everything that I've believed so far has been wrong, so therefore let me turn away from it. But it's more of a discussion point and just, in a way, increasing my faith.
So you find then that these interactions with me do, in the end, increase your faith, keep your faith stronger than if we would not be interacting?
I think it does for me. Reason I say this, and I think I mentioned this to you. So in the Bible, there's a verse that actually says, test all things. You don't just take things because it's being thrown at you. It's like, oh, yeah, I believe that. Oh, yeah, that's completely true. No, you search it out. You try to have a good understanding of it. You question it. You come to, a reasonable answer around it. If it makes sense, if it doesn't make sense, you question it until you find something that speaks the truth to what you're looking for. So in a way, it does. It helps me search out more answers, helps me talk about it more, hear it, and make a conclusive decision about why I believe what I believe in.
So when we talk about the clear atrocities that are happening in the world, say, for instance, right now, as we speak, these wildfires are, in our recorded human history, as bad as they've ever been, causing as much damage, as much suffering to individual people, like killing more people, I think, than ever before. So this is happening, and obviously people on the ground there and with other uses of helicopters and whatever else are trying their best to contain it and eventually stop it. But it's a really bad thing for those people living in those areas right now. And when you are aware that this is happening and you wonder why this happens, why God maybe allows this to happen, what is your then specific response in something like this?
Well, I can't help but think, well, that fire started somewhere. It did not just magically just poof, starts burning. Someone went somewhere, probably camping, lit a fire, forgot to turn it off. Essentially turn it off completely. And check to make sure that there are no specks that will probably set things on fire. They walk away, and, well, guess what happens? A little wind blow, a little dust comes in, ignites everything again, and then starts burning. That's a choice that someone made where they decided not to do a double check. And, carelessly kind of walked away. And, well, hundreds of lives are pretty much destroyed in that sense. Destroyed in terms of your livelihood, your home's destroyed. They have to start pretty much all over again. And some people lose their life fighting the fire. A God can come in and say, hey, we're not going to let this happen. You're not going to go camping, so I'm going to take that away from you. Nope, we're not going to have any kind of fire, so I'm going to remove that from here. Pretty much, we're not going to do what we want to do. We're not going to do what, we've set out as an option for ourselves to live a good life, an enjoyable life. We're going to take that away because it's going to indirectly affect someone else down the road. That happens. Well, yeah, okay, everyone is safe, but you can't do or make any choice about your lives in that case. So I feel bad. I don't like the fact that people's lives are being destroyed because of this. But at the same time, had it been that one person double checked, maybe this wouldn't have all started to begin with.
You put it back to the point of whatever caused the fire, and probably human error in some way initiated this fire. But what about the fact that there's been historic droughts in California for how many years that make the conditions so ripe, although ripe might be the opposite word to use, they make the conditions even possible for fires to spread in such a way and the winds to be so strong when it began, or at least to make it so difficult for, if one human's error started this based on the conditions, many, many, many more humans' capabilities are not strong enough to stop it very quickly.
I don't know the causes of the drought. I don't know what happened prior to this happening. Unfortunately, that's the situation regarding the nature surrounding California and I guess their atmosphere, their environment. But I don't know. I don't think I can speak very well to that. Yes, there could be some rain or some kind of a water wetland that doesn't allow the environment to be so dry, in which this can, any little speck of fire just kind of envelopes everything. But at the same time too, California, knowing that, hey, we always have this fire, how do we prevent it? Why maybe we shouldn't have people living in such close proximity to areas that, okay, if something were to start, it's going to engulf and destroy homes. How can we thin our forests? How can we, there are things in place that could be done to probably also help prevent some of this as well, knowing what happens. But that's not being done as effectively or efficiently. So I in regards to drought, I don't, unless I know fully the source or the cause of it, I can't really speak to it, unfortunately.
There's a drought, has been a drought. It doesn't rain there very often. Is that what causes the weather patterns? Is that just natural cycles of the world? Does God have influence? If God does, or does God have control over anything in our day-to-day lives, just based on your beliefs, as I try to understand it?
Does God have control over our day-to-day lives? Yes. Well, I believe that he made the heaven and earth. So he knows the pattern. He knows what will happen and what is going to happen. So he does control that. Yes. Why doesn't that rain? I don't know. I don't know the mind of God. I don't know. I'm not claiming at the same time to know everything. But based on the understanding that I have, I can reason, just apply some reasoning to what I'm able to make sense for me. For someone else, maybe not so much. But for me, that makes sense. I don't know. Could God send some rain? Yes. But what else are we doing to cause our atmosphere to change so that we're not getting as much of that rain? I don't know. Have you yourself considered that? What are we as humans doing that is causing that?
I think as humans for many centuries, we've been doing things that have affected the modern day climate. And that's what we have first dubbed, I think, global warming. Now, more appropriately, it's called climate change, human-caused climate change or initiated climate change. So that's happening. To me, the science proves, based on what I've learned, that it makes total sense that there's an influence. And even if somehow we're wrong and there's not a human influence, there's enough chance, enough likelihood, the probability is strong enough that there is a human influence that we should do things differently. But the governments, enough of our government, the people currently in charge of our government don't give a crap, clearly, with things that are happening. Other parts of the world, and maybe city governments, state, local governments, California is certainly a place that they're aware of it. So, okay, there may be climate change, or probably is climate change, and that may be making these fires worse than they would have been otherwise, or maybe some of the other weather-related, climate-related catastrophes that have happened, will happen, are going to be worsened by climate change. That's been the prediction for some time, based on everything that I've heard. And this is going to keep happening, keep getting worse. There's going to be more horrific situations for human beings on this planet. But yet, as someone who doesn't believe and looks to science to try to solve problems, a correlation often is that the people that are strong believers don't think that climate change is happening, or if it is, that God can fix it or will fix it.
Yes, God can take care of it. So I still go back to that point which I made. If you think that there's a human correlation based on what we've been doing that will cause a climate change that's definitely affecting the drought in which we're seeing in California, then that's a human error. God coming in to fix that, then therefore taking away that whole aspect of, okay, free will, I'm going to fix this for you. I'm going to cause you not to do A, B, C, and D. That's going to, again, lead to a cascade of these changes. So is God going to come and fix it? It's the consequences of the choices that we made. So then, therefore, we expect God to just jump in and just fix every one of the errors that we make in life and correct everything. Then how we're supposed to learn, how we're supposed to grow as human beings. So therefore, with the situation here, we now go back to, okay, so there may be some other Christian that may say, oh yeah, God will fix this. It's not human error. God will fix this. I can't speak for them. Yes, God can fix anything, but at the same time, I also feel like, well, we caused this. In a way, we caused this. So how do we go about making changes to offset that? If we can do that, it doesn't mean that God is not going to be helping along the way to make these changes.
So saying that, then you do believe that God has or does influence a correction in some ways. Do you? I don't want to speak for you. As someone who I assume prays on a regular basis, you've prayed for me, and when you've done that, I feel good about it, that you care about me and you're praying. So other things that you've prayed for, other people have prayed for, have you seen the results that, yes, something, God has intervened based on prayer or whatever else to make something better for someone?
Yeah, and I think in the Christian world, at least in my world, we believe that, with the fact that we are given to make our own choices, you also have to give God that invitation to come in and effect changes in your life. And by prayer, we're able to make that supplication and invite God to make changes in our life. Now, by doing so doesn't mean that you sit and fold your arm and say, all right, God, just do it. No, you make the positive step. You take the positive steps that you need to take for you to make those changes. So, for example, I'll give a good example will be two things actually that's happened for me. So, I graduating from college, I worked as a lab technologist for a while, and then after I left it, I was looking for a job, and I got this really, really good job, very good paying job, still as a lab technologist, but in this company that actually produced cancer therapeutic drugs. But unfortunately, that job did not last, and I was so broken up about it. I'm like, I don't know what happened. I was doing so well, but all of a sudden I'm let go from this position. I was so torn. And then I'm like, okay, I don't know where else to begin. I don't know what else to do with my life. And all of a sudden, I said, okay, well, let me pursue the path of nursing. Going into a nursing program, I didn't want to do it. I didn't have the funds for it. That was the bigger thing. I didn't have the funds for it whatsoever. If I were to start a program, I would have literally dropped out of the program because I don't have money for it. Case in point, the loans that I was given from the government to take those classes were not sufficient. But you know what? I took a step of faith. I applied for it. I prayed for it. As I applied, like, God, you made this a way. You made a way for this. You've, placed this idea in my head. And as I applied for school, each program that I applied, I only applied to 2 programs. And each program that I applied to, I got in immediately. Starting at a time that I did not even anticipate. I applied late. I got in. In fact, I even had one school just pretty much calling me to apply. And that's how I got into the program that I did and finished. I told them, well, if you've opened this window, I'm going to walk through it. Please make a way. And it's amazing how I was supported. I don't know how I did it. It's a program, a 2-year program dumped into one. Ours was 11.5-month program. And I, excelled in my courses. We were told not to work. I worked. I had to work. I found a job that was so perfect. And it just fit my schedule perfectly. And I had other people that I didn't even know. I never knew them for, in my life. And they offered to support me through this program. That is not coincidence, and that is not my own doing. But I attribute that to God's grace. That's making a way. I took a step of faith. I took a step and I invited God, hey, you got to help me out here. And I believe that worked out. And I completed that program successfully. I did not stress about money. I was able to pay my home. I was able to eat just fine. I was able to pay for my classes. I even got some money back. So that's a good example, I feel like, of me praying and God taking hold of it. And the same thing with the position that I'm in now, with the traveling position, in my career. It's something that was based off of prayer. I literally did not apply for the position in which I have, but it just came to me because I said, this is what I'm doing. God, take control and just provide me with what you see is suitable for me. This is where I would like to go. And just let God take control. I applied for my licensure and did everything in the positive step. I mean, I took the positive step that I needed to be in this position. And a job just came out of nowhere. A recruiter just called me. I didn't apply through their company, but they provided me with a perfect job, something that fit me so well. It fitted the position that I was going to, the area that I wanted to live in. It just worked out. So that's another example of where I prayed, and I feel like God intervened on my behalf with that. I don't feel like God came in and made the choices for me, but definitely assisted me through the process of it all, that I'm just constantly favored in every place that I'm going in this particular journey or job. So,
okay, so knowing you as a believer and believing in the power of prayer, I can totally understand why when these things happen that you see them as influenced by God, by your belief, by your prayers. Will you allow me to take a different look at this and just consider, okay, so with the first scenario you suggest, or you describe, that you got into this program and relatively, I guess, short notice, things came together quickly. So are you suggesting that if you didn't believe, or if someone was doing the same things that you were doing and they didn't believe, that this is something that could not have happened for them?
I don't think I can really speak to someone else's life, because I only know about my life and what I believe in. I can't say just because another person does not believe in God that, things are not going to work out for them in a certain way. I mean, we see people, the worst of the worst, or what society may consider the worst people in the world, who are being very successful, who are actually very successful and productive with their lives. And you see those that, they call themselves, Christian, that they believe, yet they are suffering, or what we consider a version of suffering. So those are two different people. One believes, one doesn't believe. One is suffering, one is not suffering. And things are working differently in their lives. I can't explain their situation. Just like I cannot explain someone else's situation just because I don't believe in God and that things will not work out the same as it did for me. I know for me, that's my faith. Through my faith, I saw things happening. That's the only thing I can say. I don't know if the other person applied, if they would have gotten in the same way. They would have, they may not have. But in my situation, in that moment, that's what happened.
And then with the second thing you speak of, getting recruited for what you deemed as the perfect position, which is certainly great. And this trip, us talking right now, doesn't happen if that didn't take place, because you're in Houston for about 3 months and neither of us had been to Austin, and we decided to reconnect here. And it's been a very good, short but good 3-day trip with you. But when you describe that, and I certainly believe and understand that you believe it was an influence by God, by your prayers, that this good thing happened in your life. But I see that, and I'm very aware that people get recruited for jobs all the time, whether it's through LinkedIn or some other way that someone that needs somebody is out looking for someone that can fill that role. So it's not uncommon for people. No one's recruited me for a job yet, unfortunately, but perhaps someday they will. And when that happens, if it happens, I'm not going to think it's any God-like influence. And maybe it is anyhow, whether or not I think it, or maybe it's not at all influenced by God, even if I think it is influenced by God. What the influence is, I don't know that we can ever say for sure, but we can give it a correlation or the causation, and there's oftentimes we get those things confused, what causes things, or just if things have correlated. So in this situation, this has happened because you were looking, I know, for some time, looking for maybe something different, and this happened, and you're very happy with it. Is it not possible that it's just by coincidence, which I'm very much strong with coincidence, and I don't know that you are, that by coincidence, this all came together for you?
And then I will ask you, what causes coincidences? What is coincidence? You have to define that. For me, I applied. Yeah, I applied for several. I felt like I worked way too hard to try to find a position here. And everywhere that I turned, they would tell me, sorry, there are no things in the South, in the Houston area. If there's anything, these are the positions that we have for you. And those were not positions that I was interested in. They were not in units or wards that I was interested in. So I just stopped. I literally stopped. I stopped and I put in my notice at work, and I just applied for licensure. I'm just going to apply for licensure. I'll just do what I can while working in Minnesota. And, I pray that something will come along. And that's what I did. Coincidence that I got recruited for it? Depends on what you define as coincidence. I would say that coincidence is also an influence in which God puts in, that you have that coincidence in your life in that situation in which you're dealing with. In the situation that I was handling, something came along when everyone else said no. Every recruiter pretty much just said no, I did not have anything. The very job that I would have had that fell through was very low paying. I was going to take that, but thank goodness it fell through because I got something else that paid better and in a better area than the other ones were. So define coincidence for me and what causes that. It just doesn't happen.
So in this case, I guess when I say coincidence, maybe it's stronger than coincidence. These people found you. How did they find you? Where did they find your name? Do you have any idea where they found your name? Might have it come from something else you applied for, and these recruiters know each other and they got your name. So whether or not God influences based on your prayers, I can't say. I can't say for certain. I don't know that you can say for certain, but ultimately the person that called you or emailed you had some piece of information to know that you existed, and they got that from somewhere. So do you think somewhere along the line God would create a piece of paper or an email where they find your name? Or does another human interact with this human that he interacted with you in some way to get them to you?
So those kind of coincidences then, could you not also attribute it to the fact that, maybe God caused this to happen as well? Where, cause another person's eyes to see something that they may not necessarily have seen, because my name was placed somewhere, my resume was placed somewhere. So, I think this person may be a good fit. Let me give him a call. And so it turns out that, I do need a job. And it's a good fit for what I'm looking for, and it worked out perfectly. There's a coincidence that could happen, but fueled by God's favor, I believe.
And you prayed for that, or prayed for something of the sort, and it happened.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to know my exact prayer is, I something came along and it fell through, and I'm a little disappointed, a whole lot disappointed, because I was ready to, get up and go, and I prayed for something better to come along, specifically in the Houston area, and in a hospital that is where I will find favor, where I will be working with reasonable and rational people, and a place that will not cause me too much stress, a place where I will find a good, area to live in. And that so happened to be answered. I got a job in the Houston area where my uncle and auntie are, in a hospital that's a magnet hospital. Magnet hospital meaning that there are new graduates, graduate friendly, which means that people that are maybe new, learning, travelers, or whatever, they will be more kind, more to them, rather than just, we have this saying in the nursing field, the old eating their young or so, where it's like the older nurses will just kind of frustrate you, or the nurses themselves that are already present there will frustrate you just because you are not of your own company. So, but I've not experienced that, and it's been great. I've had the job that now came along, had better compensation than the other one, and I get to live with my uncle and auntie and be around family, which is something that I had been looking for, and that's the whole premise in which I decided to travel as well. So my prayer was answered according to how I asked for it, specifically as.
If I can, I'll turn away from that aspect of our discussion. But I guess the point of it is, in part, that I see this totally different than you see it. It doesn't make either one of us right or wrong necessarily, but I think it's useful in knowing that, okay, you and I have been close I guess we've known each other almost 3 years, and we do have this thing that exists where we think very differently about the world in some of these ways, and what we've been able to stay pretty close and have, and whatever we want to describe our relationship or friendship as, it's existed within the realm of this. And I think it's both interesting and useful to know that, okay, we have this bond that we've created, but we also have this divide that I don't know how big you see it or as if we see it equally, but it's something that I'm very aware of.
A divide that we have?
In the way that we see the world, why things happen, how things happen. I'm very happy for you that your things have gone your way in this way. How you describe them coming about, I don't think it happened that way. I think it's totally your doing, your hard work, your effort, and you get a couple breaks, the fact that a job exists and there is a need, and you are one of the candidates, known or unknown, be known to you how these people found you exactly. You're someone willing to take that job, so it ended up happening. And just the fact that we see it differently, and we remain relatively close. The fact that I'm here taking this trip with you means something, even though we can talk right now and disagree about this totally, but it doesn't really seem to matter between us.
Yeah. Just because we have different point of views doesn't necessarily mean that we cannot cultivate a good relationship. It doesn't make either one of us right or wrong. For me, that's my truth. That's what I hold true. For you, you have a different truth that works for you, and that's fine. Whatever works for you is not necessarily going to work for me. I think the very fact that we're able to put those differences aside, yes, we disagree on certain things, we agree on certain things, and we're still able to build a relationship. I mean, it's great, and it speaks to the spirit of, the human spirit, that we can coexist peacefully with each other. But yes, my truth is not always going to be your truth.
Let's learn more about you, Blessing. What is it that you want from your life? That may be a giant question. One that you don't want to answer?
I can try.
So your life, you're living your life now. You're still young, still a young lady. Many, many, many years ahead of you. What do you want from your life?
I think at this point in my life, I've just felt like I've not been able to live it to the level in which I guess envisioned my life previously. I'm not meeting those goals in which I had set for myself. And so what I want for my life at this point is being able to live life to the fullest. And that means being able to live life without regrets, being able to, set a goal, and then walking towards it, going for it, and aiming to achieve those goals. That's what I want for my life. I think with that, I can pretty much say that I will live life to the fullest because I'm able to tackle those. Now, my life is not guaranteed tomorrow, and because that's not certain or guaranteed, then I have to start in this moment to try to live like there's no tomorrow. If I want to travel, go for it. If I want to, let's say, go back to school, work towards it. Or if I want to just make someone else's life better and easier, then I need to work towards that to see how can I be a blessing to their life, or how can I make their life easier. So that's my deal. Living life without regret and just living it to the fullest. Do you want me to speak more to what in detail?
Yeah, is there more that you want from your life? What would really make you happy?
Does anyone really know what will make them happy? Do you know what will make you happy?
No, but I think I know. What do you think you know what would make you happy?
What would make me happy definitely would be achieving the goals that I've set for myself. So speaking in details about my goal, and to be quite honest, I don't know if I know what will definitely make me happy. I feel like humans they're hard to please, and they're probably usually not content. I am one of those people that I can say that I am not content with what I do. I have a hard time being content with what I'm doing. So therefore, I'm always wanting to be more, wanting to do more. And a lot of times I do get very restless. I noticed that. I don't know you, Curt, if you've noticed that about me, that I get restless. So for example, in my workplace, after a year of being there in a particular unit, I just felt like I wanted to pull my hair out and just leave town. But I switched department, and that helped a little bit. And after a year, I became restless again. And I thought, I need to go back to family. I need to do something. Therefore, I decided to do the travel nursing. I know now that it's approaching 3 months' time that I'm here, and I'm feeling like, okay, my restlessness is going to start again. So what's next? So I don't know what will necessarily make me content. And maybe that's a good thing that I'm not content. Because I'm not content, I don't settle in one spot. So what I look at now is like, okay, some of the things that I want to achieve is, someone may say, it's because, societal norm, they say you should do this, and therefore you end up doing it. Starting a family. Starting a family has been one of my goals. Mostly because I do enjoy that stability of having, let's say, a companion and having, the little ones. I love kids. They're great. And having that of mine, and just seeing, having a little mind that you mold, and seeing them grow, and making their own decision in life. I mean, we all gone through it. We're at this point in our lives. It's great to be able to impart what you've learned to another person, another little one, and paying back, I guess. Your parents helped you grow. They took care of you. Then it's time to be a guide for someone else's life and help them grow. There's that. Will that give me contentment? Maybe not, but it's going to provide a different kind of joy in my life. Another one of my goals that I'm really looking forward to is, for the longest time I wanted to know, okay, which direction do I go? Especially with this nursing. Nursing was never an option. It was a no at all costs. I don't want to be a nurse, but I am a nurse. So what do I do with this? What I'm doing is exciting. I love my patients for the most part, and their families. I love interacting with them. But I don't feel like, for me, I can do that forever. But since I know as a fact that I cannot do that forever, at least bedside nursing, what can I do with this? I'm here. What can I do with it? And so I'm thinking, okay, I can go back to school. But what do I study? And I feel like, I don't know, something, an impression is left in my heart that, okay, I want to be, I'm going to be a nurse practitioner or go back to research. I've always enjoyed research. But one other thing is, I want to be in mental health. And the reason why that is because I've interacted with several patients that have some mental health issues. And just being able to work with them, seeing from their, very extreme point to them just progressively getting better. It's amazing to me. And wondering about their mind, their mindset, what, causes everything that's happened to them has been a fascination. And aside from that, I think it's also stemmed from the community, my upbringing as well, because in my community, being Nigerian, growing up, we see people walking around and we always say, that person is a madman, that person is a mad person. Or they will drop them at some church and hope that they get better. And for me, it was always like, we never thought anything of it, as a matter of fact. But coming, learning, growing up, learning what I know now, it's like, wait a minute, that means something is wrong with this person. There's some kind of mental defect, mental illness happening with this person. How do we help that? Not everyone has the faith to say, okay, God can heal this, God can rescue me. Not to say there are not cases in which that's happened. There are many cases in my own community in which that's happened. But for those people that those are not happening, all right, we have modern medicine. And I feel like, being in the scientific world as well, it's like, well, God made this provision for us. So for those people who do not have the faith to carry them to that level, how do we use what God has provided here, the modern medicine, to help solve this problem of mental illness and give them a good life in which they deserve and they could live? So that's something that I want to go back into. Initially, I wanted to do something else, but this impression has been in my head. I think it also stemming from things happening close to home, things happening in my life recently as well, that is just kind of getting me to think along that lines. Like, there's so many different things in my community which we just kind of brushed off, but there's so much around mental illness that we can, work towards, make better. And therefore, that's my goal as a nurse, to proceed in that fashion, become a practitioner, especially in the mental health aspect. Will that give me satisfaction? Will that give me joy? I don't know. But it is a step towards something. And knowing the person that I am, I love listening. I love asking questions. I love just being present for someone. I think that will kind of tie in with my personality as well. So there's that. And the third aspect of it will be to travel more. That is my big goal. I want to be as adventurous as I see myself. I have not done that because of one thing or the other. There's been some stressors, but that's kind of getting better. And so now that I have a potential freedom to do so, okay, how do I travel more? Traveling to other places and visiting with people always gives me that joy. See them in their environment, understand that culture, see how these people work and what gets them kicking. I enjoy that. So those are the three things that I have set for myself to, I guess, get me to that place of what you call it happiness, or what will make you happy. Will it bring me happiness? Maybe not to the fullest. Will it bring me contentment? Maybe not to the fullest. There's always going to be something, and I will continue to strive towards it and hope that that happens. But not to say that I am not happy. I am.
It's complicated being a human.
Being a human.
Even when we're actually happy, or we think we're happy, then we're not happy enough. I'm going to keep doing more. Probably that's what I feel like is going to happen throughout my life. I'm gonna resolve these things, get what I want, and then okay, now what? Well,
does that mean that we are just being greedy? That we are greedy humans? That we're always wanting more and more and more and more, and nothing ever satiates us? There's a question for you.
Maybe, but there's so many ways to go with this conversation right now. Let's see. So the one that I think we can put aside for the moment is the traveling. We just did a little trip to Austin, and that's been good. And I feel like that's if you create a life for yourself where your job is flexible enough and you have enough freedoms, traveling is very attainable. Okay, so mental illness becoming a greater, more known thing, or at least how we deem people as mentally ill and how we can maybe help people. So with that, though, your first 13, 14, 15 years of your life, you grew up in Nigeria?
Yes. Yeah, 14 years of my life. I grew up in Nigeria.
So you've now been in the United States, this might get close to saying your age, but a little bit longer than you grew up in Nigeria. So not long ago on People I Know show, I had Vina on as a guest, and she had a comparable, I suppose, when she's about that age. Her parents, who were not from the United States, although she'd been living in the United States, sent her to Hong Kong to study and to learn that culture. You grew up in your culture with your family and then ended up going to the United States. How did that all come about?
My dad has always been here for what I remember. And then my mom came and my siblings were born here. So in the meantime, while they were here, I was at home attending school. So I was in boarding school during my high school years. And then just living with my auntie, my uncles, my grandmother, in which I love them ever so dearly. I think by doing so, I was able to kind of learn about a family, members as much. And it was good. It was imperative that I do that because it also ingrained in me the cultural values in which I have today. So and I came here finally because I was approaching my college years and my parents wanted me to come back to live with them and get started on that journey.
Which you ended up doing. So as an outsider, the way I see this is you grew up very much clearly in a Nigerian culture, growing up in Nigeria until 14, and then you grew up probably in the Phoenix area in also probably still a very strong Nigerian culture, but in a different part of the world, and you're shaking your head, so tell me where I'm wrong.
The Phoenix area does not have a strong Nigerian culture. I mean, the area in which we live in, we had my aunt, my auntie, my uncle, and some of my cousins. There are still a few Nigerian community, but the Phoenix area does not have a strong Nigerian community. So no, I lived amongst a wide variety of people, mostly Caucasian, of course, but with some community influence, with some Nigerian community influence, not as strong, but some.
And anyone that might be listening to us, I'm assuming that they know where Nigeria is, and that would be based on my upbringing with the American educational system. I know that we mostly ignore Africa unless you really get to a higher level of learning. And Nigeria is one of how many 40-some countries in Africa and the most populous one?
Correct.
Give me a greater understanding of Nigeria from you, a born Nigerian.
Well, I guess, on the map, Nigeria is in the continent of Africa. For many people that may not necessarily know that. It's in the heart of Africa, we like to say. So if you look at the African map and right where in the head of it, right where you would consider a heart is Nigeria there. We're very coastal. And then for me, I grew up in south of Nigeria, which is the very bottom. We're very close to the Atlantic. We're very close to the coast. So we have a lot of body of water. So we're considered part of the Niger Delta in Nigeria as well. We are from a very small tribe. Our language is known as Ibibio. So very small, minority there. But our culture is really rich. I mean, most everyone in Nigeria knows our culture. We are known for hospitality and being kind for our food. We're known for our food, very much so. If you were to speak with anyone in Nigeria, that's what they would say. But the Nigerian culture is actually very rich. I prefer mine. I may be biased, but I feel like mine has a lot more than others, from the dancing, to the food, to how we treat our elders. We're a very rich culture. The environment as is, Nigeria is divided into 3 different areas in which we have my area, the southern part, which is more of a rainforesty type of topology. We have a lot of, tall trees, palm trees, very green, very lush. It rains a lot, which is great. And then we have the midland part of the country, which has, tall grasses, but not as, lush trees, not as thick, their forest. And then we have the northern part, which is like the desert. It is dry, hot and dry. But it's great if, let's say, someone were to visit Nigeria and just kind of travel around. It's amazing to kind of see the different dynamics and the changes in topology going from the north to the south. I enjoy the country. It's a growing country. It's great. A lot of people may not like it, but it's beautiful. So much more things to do. So much things to do there when you go. So it's never boring.
You mentioned your tribe being a small tribe. If you can, give me a sense of how many tribes there are, how well people that come from the different tribes get along, and I guess we'll start with that.
Oh, that's a good question. I cannot tell you the numbers. Unfortunately, I have removed myself from learning those, from learning those things in depth. But small tribe. So within my community, let's see. I want to say I grew up more in a township in that township we spoke our dialect. In that township, I want to say maybe up to 30,000 people within that, and it's divided up into different local governments. That's what we consider. So here it may be considered different cities, but ours will be different local governments. Within that, we do speak Ibibio. And then if you go to a different state, which are also a part of this other tribe, not tribe, but we are related to them, like the Cross River, they speak Efik. And our books, native language books are written Efik. We all speak that. We understand that. Let's say our Bible can be written in Efik. We understand that. So in mine, we have different dialects of the Ibibio tribe. The Ibibio language within ourselves.
So, Blessing, if you could, I'm assuming most of the listeners are from the United States and understand how things are done in the United States and how it's structured with 50 states and pretty free entry from one state to the next, and everyone can get along pretty well, mostly except for maybe some political things and possibly some racial, religious things. In Nigeria, moving about, how many states or regions are there? Does everybody get along pretty well? What is it like there, and like how populated it is, and everywhere you go compared to where you're from?
Where I am from, the South, Akwa Ibom State, is not overtly populated. I cannot tell you the number of, the population. However, being able to travel from one state to the other is very easy. You can either drive, take a car, fly, take a bus, however. But it's very easy to move from one place to the other. Unfortunately, because each state has multiple different languages, you have to be able to speak either English, proper English, British English, or you can speak Pidgin, which is broken English. And that's the only thing. But people are it's very easy, for people that are knowledgeable, it's very easy to pick up on other dialects and other languages depending on the region. But Pidgin English would be the standard, let's say, English that you can speak to anyone and they're able to pick up and run with it. What was the other question you asked?
Do people get along from different region to different region? Would someone know that you're not from there when you're traveling around the country?
Yeah, they will know very much so because you don't know how to speak the language. They will know that you're not from there. Also because of your name, and maybe how you behave. People do get along very well. Of course, there's the issue of tribalism, but we don't necessarily see that full blown. We see that in the background, especially when it comes to marriages, or family getting along, or people from one culture trying to get together to do, let's say, a business together. We very much see that, one tribe thinks they're better than the other one thinks they're better than the other. So, and as we go about, we have different names for each different tribes. Like my tribe, we favor ourselves, and we think other tribes may not be as good as us. And do we discriminate against those other tribes? Very likely. And we see that also in the government sector as well, that there's discrimination against the different tribe and cultural regions in which people are from. Unfortunately, I was told that this is a country in which we, when the Europeans decided that they are going to bring the African countries together, they just kind of pull people from different cultural group and just merge them together. Because, for example, the Lagosians are known as, and Lagos actually was the first capital of Nigeria until it was moved to Abuja. So, Lagos is pretty well developed as well. It has some rural areas as well within it. Very populated. And the Lagosians are known as the Yorubas. That's the main tribe, one of the big tribe. And then another tribe would be the Igbos. That's another bigger one. And we're a subset of the Igbos because our culture is very similar to theirs. Moving around the country is easy. Lagos is it's very populated, overly populated. It's like New York, but 10 times more. Where a lot of people go to, and you will find a diverse amount of people there from different tribes, and they do get along. Either they use proper English, or they use Yoruba language, or they use Pidgin English together to move about and communicate with each other. Otherwise, they do. It's a friendly country.
How would you say for a non-Nigerian, if someone comes in from a different country in Africa or somewhere in Europe, the United States, or Asia, or anywhere else, how is a true outsider treated, say, in Nigeria, where you're from?
How would they be treated?
Yes. Is there any like racist tendencies there? Like we feel like there's probably some in this country. Does that exist? Do you see it in that country?
I don't know how Nigeria of today is. Let's say when I go back, when I do go visit, I try to go every 2 years. It seems like that's what the pattern shows. I don't really stay in the main city enough to see how people are treated. But when a foreigner comes to the country, I know that actually the country Nigeria and a lot of the culture, they enjoy foreigners coming in, and they do treat them very, very well. They do treat them very, very well. To the point that it almost feels like they treat the foreigner better than their own people. And that to me sometimes can be a little infuriating. And that's the truth of the matter. A lot of times foreigners are treated better because it's like they come in and they see them as, oh, these people have never been here before. They're interested in this. If they see someone expressing interest in the culture, they welcome them in. They want to show you more. And that's what I enjoy about the Nigerian culture. It's like if you express interest, if you show that you have an ounce of care in your body, they will just absorb you and maybe overwhelm you with their lovingness. But they will absorb you and show you different things about the environment, the culture, just make you feel very welcome. Now, not every person, like every human spirit, not everyone is as loving. There will be some people that are not so friendly. And I think that's to be expected in every country. When you go, not everyone is going to be as welcoming. But in this case, they are. For any traveler, they're very welcoming.
Blessing, good morning. Where the recording ended was when we arrived to your residence last night, and after a short night's sleep, we turned around for an early morning ride to the airport in Houston, but we can continue our conversation from here. So you just finished talking about the experiences, some of them from growing up in Nigeria and helping me understand some of what there is, a little of what there is to understand about that country and culture. And what about the transition for you when you arrived to the United States then, and the experience as a Nigerian, then growing into and becoming, I suppose, an American over the years? What was that like for you?
Good morning, Curt. Are you still waking up a little bit? So moving here to the U.S. and transitioning into the society, it wasn't, I want to say it was not too difficult, being that it was a young age for me. So when I got here, I ended up starting as a sophomore as opposed to a junior in high school, so I got held back a year. And in a way, that was probably good for me. The school system was slightly different in the way that information was presented here and how people study. The educational system in Nigeria, it's a very theoretical environment. We read a lot. For example, in the classroom, the teacher will come in and will start teaching with few notes on the board. You're responsible for taking down notes and what the teacher has to say. And when it comes to a day for the test, you are responsible for studying whatever and everything there is because you do not know what the teacher is going to put on the exam. And that was a shock to me when I came here, and where, either PowerPoint information were presented, and then for the study, you were given a study guide. I thought that was just the strangest thing ever. So adjusting to that method of, studying was difficult. In a way, it was easier for me because I already studied ahead and knew what to expect. The manner in which the questions were asked were rather different, was used to short answer and oral presentation, as opposed to here, where everything was objective. That was quite a change, and struggle a bit with that actually. But making friends, it was easy. However, I think for me, even though I spoke English, we speak English in Nigeria, so coming here, English wasn't an issue, but my accent was very different, so people have a hard time understanding me. And that's where I struggle, where a lot of times to begin with, I was just starting to realize myself in Nigeria, and then coming here, just having to start all over again. I am already naturally introverted. Not being able to communicate well, I want to say, because of the accent barrier, having to repeat myself several times to people that were possibly friends was difficult, and I got frustrated a lot of the times that I had to repeat myself. So when in the school system, I found myself that I rather go to the library and read or eat somewhere else where I didn't have to interact with other people, because finding something in common to talk about, first of all, and then when you talk, having them understand you without you repeating yourself 20 different times on the same issue was difficult, and I did not want to deal with that. I think that's where I started learning how to, okay, if you don't want to deal with anything, find a different way to work it out. Go somewhere else. Don't try to figure that out. So, but over time, it got better. I joined track and field. I made some more friends. Found things in common to talk about, and that made it easier and easier and easier. And when I mentioned having to come here and starting as a sophomore in high school as opposed to junior, is because a lot of my peers were much older than me, and that made it also difficult to find things that were in common, because I always felt like you're junior and couldn't relate to what exactly they were conversating about. But over the period of the rest of the 3 years that I was there, it got easier and easier. It wasn't perfect, and still, even now, it's still a transitionary process depending on where I go. So it was good.
So it sounds like the big thing was the language, and even though you knew the language, just the accent. So that clearly made it clearly made you different. If someone wanted to pick out a difference, and they could tell that you're not from here. So besides the language aspect, describe the social, racial dynamics of that area at that time, and you sounding different. Do you feel like you look different then also?
No, funny enough, I did not think along those lines that I did look different. I think later on is when I noticed, okay, maybe I did look different in regards to how I dressed, how I presented myself compared to the American children. But no, being in the school system, it was a pretty diverse. It wasn't too diverse, but anyway, a majority of were Caucasian, and then we had the Mexican and the African Americans. And I don't think I met any other African or newly transitioned African student in my school. It was a fairly new school to begin with. But no, I guess I didn't look at that as I began high school. I guess it was later on in college that I started noticing it more so. But I felt we were pretty much the same. We're here, we're coming to learn. Yes, everyone had their different look. The Caucasian girls had blonde hair, in which I call golden hair, and people will laugh at me when I say, oh, there was this girl that I met, that sat next to me, and she had golden hair, and tried to describe her until I finally learned the term blonde. But apart from that, there wasn't, I didn't really notice a huge difference in terms of our looks.
Is there anything else that you think you have a perspective on that might help me to educate me or to someone listening to our conversation about what it's like being someone moving from another country to the United States?
I guess the perspective that I gained as a student, I would say, is when I came to the U.S., I thought that many of the students or many of the people here take education for granted. Reason being, in the environment that I was in, going to school, we love going to school. We love getting educated. And a lot of times the government did not acknowledge the teacher that well in regards to their salary. And so we had a lot of strike. In my, community, not everywhere, but they had a lot of strike. And so it took a while for people to be able to complete their education because they will go on strike semesters at a time. So coming here, I felt like students were taking the education for granted, especially when we were in class and you don't see students studying or participating in the activities that were being, that the teachers were presenting in class. And not only that people overall do take their lives for granted, that they have many resources here, yet they don't use it to its full potential. So that's one of the things that I did see coming in. And also now, the very thing that I am trying not to do as well in the U.S.
Something that we spoke about before I started the recording yesterday is walking through Austin. You had made the observation that you and I walking together, that we likely, to anyone that doesn't know us, would present as an interracial couple. I being a American-born white guy, you're a Nigerian, African-born black woman, and someone looking at us might notice that, of course. And you thought that there wasn't much of that happening in Austin. So you would even observe specifically that you thought people were looking at us. Over the last few years, because of a variety of situations and people I've been with, I've gotten used to that, where I used to be hyper kind of alert to noticing that. I guess I don't even notice that anymore. But you did notice that. So what kind of looks did you actually get? And what really did you feel that you saw?
I guess me noticing that, in a way, it kind of stems from where I've spent most of my life in the U.S. So, for example, I went to school at Northern Arizona University, and noticing that there's fewer darker-skinned people in the area. For example, in my classes, I would happen to be the only, I guess, African or black person in the classroom a majority of the time through my entire 4 years there. Was it 4 years, 5 years there? A lot of times I was the only black person in the classroom. And so I started becoming more sensitive to, when people do notice me, because I seem to be out of place in their surroundings, or when they're staring at me, being in their environment. So, and then going back to Phoenix, grew up in pretty much a majority Caucasian neighborhood. It wasn't an issue. Got along very well, didn't have any problems whatsoever. And then we moved to a different neighborhood, which it was less diversity in that neighborhood. And I became more aware, and with an incident that happened, I became even more so aware. So whenever I am in an environment where I don't notice people, so in my community, in the surprise community in Arizona, I started noticing more interracial couple. and adapted to that. So when I am outside of that and in a place where you don't see, let's say, a white to a black person walking together, especially of a different gender, I start picking up on those. I start picking up on how people notice when I was walking with you. I don't know if it was necessarily out of the fact that we may be an interracial couple or not, but while we were in Austin, I didn't notice very much a black person and a white person, or couple, for lack of a better word, necessarily walking together. I don't know if you noticed that. I mean, the look wasn't in a bad way, but more of a head turn that I would normally, I guess, expect or have seen.
And I know I used to look for that more. Like I felt it, I guess, at a certain point. And maybe with more experience with that, I've just stopped looking, stopped caring, I guess, maybe is what happened. And not saying you do or don't, but I think I'm just much less aware, which I'm happy to have reached that place, because I think it's a much healthier place to be, to not worry or care or even know about something like that. So whether or not we present as a couple or an interracial couple is one thing, but the reality of it is we've known each other for the better part of 3 years. And I think, for a lack of better way to describe it, we're friends, but oftentimes more than friends, less than boyfriend, girlfriend, and it's mostly me, and maybe somewhat you, but I'm kind of a unusual guy in the way I handle things. So I don't know what's as a way for someone listening to People I Know show to help the listener understand the host, me, Curt. You know me pretty well as a person that I know well. How this dynamic, or me, how is it that you would describe this?
Describing the dynamic that we have, it's hard to find words to describe it. I guess from the get-go when we met, it was more of, I am new to Minnesota area and you volunteering to show me around, just so I can familiar myself with the city. And I thought that was very kind of you. And I felt like you did a fantastic job of doing that by introducing me to, let's say, the different sports events that happen in Minnesota, showing me things, presenting me to your family, which I thought was strange. Like, what's happening? But anyway, meeting your family and such. It was, I was pretty grateful for someone to take the time to show me around. And I think from there we kind of became fast friends, in which you were a person that I was able to rely on. Let's say if I needed something, I could ask you, or if I allow myself to ask you for your help during that process. It's been interesting getting to know you as a person. Initially, you didn't strike me as strange, but your mindset was rather different. And I guess right off the get-go, when we had started talking or somewhat attempted to date, we talked about, the things that we want in life. And one of the things in a relationship was that we were both, talking to other people outside of this, but at the same time just kind of trying to date and see what happens. And you were pretty forward in, presenting, yes, I'm talking to someone else. I'm, interested in meeting new people and just exploring. And at the time, I was too, being that I was, new to the city, just starting for the first time to date. And I was pretty excited about that setup. Like, okay, we'll try this. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. With the option of, well, if you meet someone else that's more interesting than me, then, or that you're interested in, then go for it. I did like that. And so that's how we started our journey together, with just being, I guess, friends, and occasionally not so being more than friends. It had been a good journey. And during that time period, seeing you as the person that you are, understanding your mindset, I think in the beginning I thought your way of reasoning, I thought it was just too extreme, again, lack of a better word, I want to say judgmental, because of the things that you presented to me. When you did, it was so extreme. Oh, people shouldn't do this, or they should do that. And I'm thinking, why should they even have to do it just because you think your way of reasoning was correct? Maybe other life instances has presented them with a different option, and that's why they've choose to live their life, this certain way. But for you, no, that was wrong. And you always had this way of saying, I felt like I just want to grab someone and just change their life for them and tell them, no, this is wrong. And oh my goodness, that used to drive me mad. But I didn't show that because I was just thinking, well, maybe you're just trying to understand life in a different manner. And I made it a point to defend this individual, trying to present it in a different way for you to see it. And during that time, I just felt like everything that you did was just to the other extreme. And now I see that you were trying to maybe discover yourself, or discover a better way of thinking, and to be a better person. But that way was just too extreme. it was too much of an extreme method for me. That's how you came. And another thing that I did notice is that you were trying too hard. There was an incident that happened. I think it had to do with you coming out as an atheist, or pronouncing that, yeah, you were an atheist. And I remember one time that you wanted to present to your family at Thanksgiving dinner. And I thought, my God, what is the matter with this person? It's Thanksgiving. Do not upset the people. Just sit down and have a meal. And then maybe. And the reason why I thought that was, you were so infuriated by the way people thought. And I think you kind of included your family in that. And you just wanted to make them understand and know where you're coming from. And you were just so passionate, and your passion led to anger that you need to do it now. And I think in a way I just kind of told you, maybe not Thanksgiving. Maybe not at that moment that you need to present that. And I think you came back and told me that no, you didn't present it at Thanksgiving, that you didn't think it was an appropriate time to do so. And so you chose a different time to notify your family. And that was one of the cases where I just thought, you're trying to be different, but you're also trying too hard to be different. Many instances. But as time went on, I just saw this change in you, where it wasn't about, I'm right, people should do this because I think it's right, but more of, okay, people can make their decision, but they can make informed decision based on the information they have gathered. And I think I like that person more over time. Just saying that you're not trying to shove things down someone's neck because you think, oh, this is the better way to do things, but rather trying to see it a different angle. Okay, maybe they're having another child because that's what they want, and they're buying a bigger house because they need a bigger environment for them to play around. Yes, that may mean they're incurring more debt, unfortunately. And maybe they should have more money before they have children, but that's usually not the case. They have a dream and they want to live it. Let them live it. They'll figure out the rest. So those kind of situations, I've seen your mindset change. And you're not trying to be something because you saw someone else doing it and thought, we have to do it this way as well. I think there were many times where I told you, you're trying too hard to be different. And that's what I felt like. And it was for someone that was attempting to date. I saw that as more of a turnoff for me. And therefore, I wasn't very much into what we were having. But then again, we had a different understanding entirely. So our whole dynamic has been kind of strange. But I like the better Curt. I mean, I like this newer version of Curt, who is trying to be different and trying to be better and trying to show other people what he's learned and how to help them be better by being vulnerable and putting himself on the line there for people to hear. I like that. And when it comes back down to our dynamic, being with someone as you, or just often on dating someone like you who is of a different race than myself, and on top of that, who is an atheist, does not have the same belief system or I guess spiritual belief as I do, that's been an interesting journey, because I tried to balance, I think initially just moving past the fact that, okay, this person is of a different race than I am. We have different cultural belief entirely. If I present something, especially concerning the Black community, he may have a different view. And there have been, I think right off the bat when we first met, we had this conversation where your view was just different, and it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and I never brought up that issue anymore because I felt like you just don't understand. So because you're not me, or you're not living in the community that I'm living. And then when it comes to the belief, I know we constantly have a conversation about it, and it's been good. It's not changed our dynamic as friends. And I've appreciated that. But I think that's one of the bigger reasons where we've not really grown more past the point of friendship, because we think our beliefs are just too different. And so therefore we've always used that as one of our reasoning. And that's why we've not gone past it. And I think, well, having that, it just kind of opened my eyes and my mind to different things, to other possibility that, okay, it's not always about the religion. You can coexist with someone that has a different religious belief than you. And that's fine. I think when I've mentioned to certain people that, oh, there's this person that I'm interested in, and he's he's an atheist. Some people have reacted in the way of, oh no, that's not going to work. But at the same time too, I see that we work when we've tried to make it work. We've worked, and the belief system has not been an issue. We've coexisted. So it has been a journey with you, and getting to know your person, seeing how someone has changed. And I believe I myself may have changed as well. And I know definitely I have changed in my wants and then my needs. It does have changed over time.
You have been a good person to influence me to be a little less maybe extreme, because I think being someone that's, you say I try to be different, and maybe I do try to be different, but I think more than anything, I realize in areas where I am different, and I don't know always how to present that to people I know closely or people in general. And I feel like recording a conversation like this and presenting it to whoever happens to listen is a way of demonstrating some of these things in a way that, okay, I think differently here perhaps, and because of this person here has influenced me, and I get to present it. So maybe you've made me a little bit less extreme and trying to manage these things and just present what I've learned, what I know, what I think is valuable to whoever is wanting to take that information in. So I do appreciate your perspective on that. and your feedback on me, and probably keeping me from doing some dumb things at some times in my life. We are nearing the end of our drive here as we get to the airport, but I do want to give you the opportunity, as I do everybody, for the Being Wrong segment. Do you have anything that in the past you think you were wrong about and you changed your mind on?
I think it's the idea of mental illness, or the clear word, depression. So in my upbringing, we have the term depression does not exist. If you're sad, you're sad. And if someone sees that, they just say, oh yeah, just dust it off and just keep going. Nothing to it. And I've always carried that mindset of, yeah, what is depression? Yeah, it's a mindset. You want to dust it off, you dust it off and just keep going. You'll be fine. And I think I carry that in myself as well, that if I'm hurt about something, it's just dust it off and keep going. It for me, that has been great, because it's kept me from just sitting and wallowing and licking my wound many of times. But I have come to understand, especially in the being in nursing here, it has taught me that sometimes there are extreme cases in which depression is deficiency in some chemical in the brain that, allows people to live normally, but rather they become depressive. And the term seasonal depression, notice that that's also a part of a person's life. So personally, living in Minnesota and living in a gloomy area, which it's not something that my body is used to, I went through that. And I just, there are days where I just feel really, really, really sad. I don't want to label it depression, but I felt really, really, really sad. And I am able to pick myself up and keep going because of that idea of just dust yourself off and keep going, or my faith and being surrounded by people of a similar faith that has helped me. But the idea that I used to think that anyone can just dust it off, there's no such thing as depression, has since changed. There is such a thing, and the only reason we deal with that is talking about it, acknowledging it, that it exists, especially in the African community. It exists. We don't talk about something like that. And then you find many people, you hear stories of so-and-so auntie who was like this, and you're thinking, dude, something was wrong with that auntie, and it just needed a little, someone to be there to help them talk it out and work through it, or maybe a little modern medicine here and there. So my idea has changed. My belief has changed. Not everyone is able to dust it off. Not everybody is able to use your faith to overcome whatever the situation is. Some people may need a little bit of faith, a little bit of combination of modern medicine, a little bit of faith to overcome such situation. So I have been enlightened. And with that, going in this profession in which I really want to, I hope I can use that knowledge not to just assume that anyone can just dust anything off. Not everyone has that strong will to do so.
With that, we are arriving at the airport. Thank you for taking the time to have this conversation on Recording Blessing. It was, I think, very enlightening for me also.
Indeed, Curt. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to People I Know Show. Check the show notes for a link to the Waking Up podcast conversation between Sam Harris and Bart Ehrman that Blessing and I talked about early on in this episode. A reminder, please take a moment to rate and review People I Know Show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Search People I Know Show on Facebook or Instagram to follow, see photos, and interact with the podcast. Plus, you can always email me, Curt Karstensen, at peopleiknowshow@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.